Christopher Nolan's newest film hits theaters this weekend. Should you ought to see it or ought to skip it? I'll let you know right now. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with my review of the Odyssey. The review embargo just lifted. This is the latest film from director Christopher Nolan following his Best Picture winner Oppenheimer. And hey, the gang's all back behind the camera. We've got Hoyte van Hoytema as director of photography, Jennifer Lame editing the movie, Ruth de Jong doing production design, Nolan himself writing the screenplay, Emma Thomas producing, and Ludwig Göransson once again providing the music. Now, one quick note going into this review, I didn't find out until I arrived at my press screening, which was 3 hours away, that despite this being the first movie ever shot entirely on IMAX film, we would not be watching the Odyssey in IMAX. Nobody was really sure why, but as compensation, I guess, a projectionist was flown in to show the movie on 70mm film in a non-IMAX aspect ratio. That's the format that you'll see, or at least the aspect ratio that you'll see on a standard screen. So when I talk about the look of this film, keep in mind it is based on a still, frankly, amazing-looking film print, but not the IMAX version. I'm going to try to catch it in IMAX as soon as I can, maybe before my spoiler review, but it's tough to get tickets this weekend. But either way, I will report back, and I do plan to see the movie a second time in IMAX. The Odyssey is, of course, based on Homer's Odyssey, the ancient Greek epic poem featuring the war hero Odysseus on his years-long journey home from Troy to his wife Penelope, their son Telemachus, and his kingdom of Ithaca. As for who's in the movie, well, it might be easier to tell you who isn't in the movie, so I'll tell you who I thought the standout performances in the movie were. I really liked John Leguizamo as Eumaeus, Odysseus' most loyal friend, a blind man whose devotion and patience are matched only by Odysseus' wife Penelope. Anne Hathaway as Penelope spends years fending off suitors and refusing to let go of the belief that her husband's returning home, and I thought she was great in the movie. Tom Holland plays Telemachus, Odysseus' son, who finds his possession threatened by Penelope's many suitors, chiefly Robert Pattinson's Antinous. I don't mean this as an insult, but I felt like this was the most human and adult performance from Tom Holland to date, and I've liked him in a lot of other things. Himesh Patel also stands out as Eurylochus, Odysseus' second in command, and Samantha Morton and Charlize Theron also stand out in two crucial parts as key figures along Odysseus' journey. The movie is anchored, of course, by Matt Damon as Odysseus, and I think he's good in the movie, but this role is written as kind of the anti-Oppenheimer. Instead of everything in the movie circling around him, Odysseus circles around most of the events in the movie. I mean, it makes sense. This is an epic, not a psychological examination like Oppenheimer was, but it does tend to allow all of the other characters and the events to shine while Damon remains the stoic center. It's not really until Act 3 that he gets to stretch a little bit more, and I think that he's very good when he does get the chance. Now, there has already been an epic's worth of online discourse about this movie, and I'll say up front, if there are things you already don't like about the Odyssey, then I don't think there's anything actually in the movie that's going to change your mind. If you don't like the armor design or the ship design, there's no canon explanation in the script as to why they look the way they do. If you don't like the cast of the movie, there's no wink and a nod about none of them being Greek. And if you especially don't like the casting of Lupita Nyong'o and Elliot Page, who's not playing Achilles, by the way, just know that all of this fuss has been over two characters with maybe 10 minutes of combined screen time in a 3-hour movie. These were the choices that Christopher Nolan made, and he's not trying to make an excuse for them or explain them. So if you're angry already, you'll probably stay angry. But if you're basing your thoughts solely off of just a couple of trailers, then I do think that you should give the movie a chance. Personally, I don't share the outrage over historical accuracy as far as the designs and everything in a Hollywood movie based on a fictional ancient poem. I think that there's room for artistic license. I don't at all subscribe to the outrage regarding Nyong'o and Page's casting, and I disagree with most of the criticisms of the movie's look. I've seen a lot of people say, based on the trailers, that the film looks ugly and drab, but I think it looked incredible, with Hoyte van Hoytema showing once again why he's one of the best cinematographers working today. Yes, a lot of the scenes are dark because they're in dark rooms, or drab because they're on the stormy sea, but I think that there are some other scenes that are brilliant and beautiful. Now, let's talk about a classic Christopher Nolan technical issue that I did have some problems with, and that's the sound mix. As usual, dialogue is often just one element in Nolan's sound mix instead of the main element, and there were a few times where I found myself leaning forward in my seat, kind of straining to hear. Like, what'd he say? This is most egregious in one of the first scenes of the film. It's the already infamous dad scene, which is held in a crowded banquet hall. I can only understand about every fourth word or so in this scene, and it was so early in the movie that I was worried that this was going to spell trouble for the rest of it. Luckily, this was the worst and most extended example of the tough-to-hear mix, but overall, at least in my theater, this movie was loud, like concert loud, sometimes plugging my ears, should have brought earplugs loud. Nolan has established that this is his style when it comes to sound. Critics be damned, but there is a point at which I think your stylistic preference is a distraction for the audience, and this is the one area where I do wish that Chris Nolan would compromise his artistic vision. The screenplay, I think, is where I'll probably find the most common ground with the film's harshest critics. I wasn't bothered by the use of dad and its variants in the movie, and the inclusion of Odyssey saying "let's go" in the trailer was actually a disservice to the movie because in context, it's not meant as a rallying cry. It's a military commander telling his troops that it's literally time to depart and retreat from their position. But if there's one thing I've consistently found underwhelming in Nolan's films, it's his screenplays. And for me, The Odyssey was a regression from what we got with Oppenheimer. But it's not a consistent type of letdown. At times, I think the dialogue really crackles. It has a lot of humor. Sometimes it's pretty profound. At other times, the dialogue is just flat. Not bad necessarily, just flat, which isn't uncommon in Chris Nolan's screenplays. There are two attempts at wrapping up the story in a "what did this all mean" bow, one of them concerning Odysseus' personal motivations, which really worked for me, and another serving as a kind of warning for the future, I think, that really didn't. Now, I'll confess, I don't have an intimate knowledge of the original text. I read it in high school, so I remembered the main beats, but not much else. So Homer experts and Odyssey heads may be angered by some script changes that I wasn't aware of. I do know, even from what I can remember, that the gods themselves don't play as direct a role in the events of the film, at least not in the same way that they do in the Homer original, but they aren't discarded either. Despite Nolan's commitment to reality in filmmaking, he didn't turn the Odyssey into a story where everything has an earthbound reason to happen or the gods are vague beings who aren't really spoken of. They are crucial elements to the story, although almost never seen, and Nolan has constructed the entire story as kind of a dialogue between Odysseus and the gods, which doesn't really come into full focus until the end of the movie. It might not work for purists, but it did work for me. I mean, look, the script has issues, but it isn't horrible. I think the most frustrating thing is that I believe the script is the only thing holding this movie back from absolute greatness. Because when the Odyssey is firing on all cylinders, it is one of the greatest cinematic spectacles to hit the screen in a very long time. The kind of epic filmmaking that I thought was almost as ancient as Homer's Odyssey. Nolan's commitment to shooting on location and practically whenever possible, but at a scale that would demand the use of digital effects in 99% of other movies, gives the Odyssey a sprawling, gargantuan feel that we may not see again for many, many years. Despite Odysseus and his crew facing giants, whirlpools, ocean storms, sea creatures, swarming armies, and more, I never once, even in the back of my mind, thought, well, that's computer generated, that's CG, and it's because most of it isn't. Not that there aren't digital effects, but so much of the movie is real, and you're steeped in that reality, that the effects just kind of blend in. It's the Jurassic Park mentality. Shoot everything you possibly can for real, and use digital effects for the absolutely impossible. Between you and me, sometimes I thought that Nolan's commitment to reality was a little showy, kind of a self-imposed directorial purity test. But to stick to it with the story, this epic took both guts and talent. And this approach only makes the film more effective. I was in awe of so many things in this film because they were real. If they'd been digital effects, nothing would differentiate this movie from any number of other CGI spectacles. Nobody is making movies like Christopher Nolan right now. And if the script had been just a little better, like 20% better, I legitimately think this could have been one of the great movies, period. One thing that I think is great is how the movie is structured. Nearly all of the major segments, including historical background and pieces of Odysseus' journey, are framed as a character recounting what has happened. Sometimes it's Odysseus from memory, sometimes it's others based on legend. This version of the Odyssey is packaged as Homer's Odyssey originally was, orally, something to later be written down and shared with future generations. This is established early with a minor character who, yes, is played by Travis Scott. He plays a bard in the Greek tradition. No, he doesn't start rapping Homer's words over the beat to sicko mode, which I think is what some people were concerned about. The only downside to this oral tradition approach is that some characters I think do get short shrift since the stories begin either in media res or after their part in the story has started. I do think some massaging could have been done maybe to round them out a little bit more and to make the film feel just a little less episodic. But the episodes that Christopher Nolan makes in this movie, each individual segment of the Odyssey is fantastic, even though many of these stories, such as the Cyclops and the Sirens, have been repeated so often that they've literally passed into our myth and legend. Nolan makes these stories feel fresh again through how he stages each one of these segments, sometimes adjusting the tone of the film, sometimes shifting perspective away from what you might expect. Two sequences of this movie are straight up horror, one traditional horror and one body horror, and another sequence I think brilliantly uses sound to show us a familiar beat in a new way. It's the business around these big chunks that I think could have used more work, the edges. But once we're immersed in something like the Battle of Troy, the Odyssey is filmmaking at its best. I may not have found the Odyssey to be overall a great film, but I do think it is a very good one. The first two acts, while at times uneven, rock pretty hard. It's the third act, I think, where most of the problems lie. It has some amazing parts, but others that drag and make the movie feel its length a bit toward the end. I think if some of the time from the third act had been devoted to stitching the first two acts of the movie together just a little bit better, giving us a little more context for a few key characters, and taking a little air out of the end of the movie, this would have been a stone-cold classic from day one, and it may still be. I can also say, though, that this was my favorite movie-going experience of the year by far, and it's not even close. It is the embodiment of what Nicole Kidman has spent years trying to explain before every AMC movie. This is why movies exist and why we go to see them. The Odyssey is movie magic, plain and simple. So taking all elements into account, the Odyssey gets a very high-end It's Good rating, downgraded slightly only because of the script and a few technical issues I had, but it is an absolute see it now if you're going for pure cinematic spectacle. In my personal ranking of Christopher Nolan's filmography, I would put this a little below what I consider his S-tier films, Oppenheimer and The Dark Knight, but it would be leading the way in the next tier down. So those are my thoughts on the Odyssey. What do you think? Are you going to be heading out to see it this weekend? I really think you're going to be doing yourself a disservice if you don't see it on the biggest screen possible. Let me know down in the comments below, and be sure to stay tuned right here for the latest in movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.